No, this is not my Halloween costume. Um, Sadly, there is a second wave of COVID that is imminent, and there's been a new rise of cases of coronavirus that is now among us. And there's also been the reinstatement of some restrictions that were previously lifted, and there's the reinstatement of that. So now that things are getting even more serious, I will be wearing this for the remainder of today's episode. That being said, welcome to the season finale of The Months the Earth Stood Still, the series where I dive into films that I own physical copies of to watch during lockdown that have a pandemic theme to them. So, the being that this is the season finale, it's also a very special episode because it also happens to be our Halloween episode. And what better way to celebrate a Halloween episode than to celebrate the filmography of a film director who made a movie, literally, about the holiday of Halloween. So, we're going to be diving into the films of John Carpenter. Now, I'm not going to be talking about just one movie. This is catered more to those interested in doing a John Carpenter movie marathon that have something to do with COVID 19, either by the title of the film and also by some of the things that are going on in the film, as such as the themes that some of those other movies have, which I will be diving into in greater detail towards the end of the episode. So, that being said, since things are getting more serious, I think there's going to be a season 3 planned. And at the end of this episode, I will draw names of who will be the lucky winner to be holed up with me in a bunker during a third quarantine for season 3 of this series. So, on with the films. Now, if you're going to do a John Carpenter movie marathon that's COVID themed, being that the coronavirus started in Wuhan, China, and being that it was a global pandemic, it was a pretty big deal around the world. I'm going to start with Big Trouble in Little China. Now, the virus hit certain areas of the world pretty hard, Italy being one, and it really affected a lot of people on the East Coast, especially on Manhattan Island. So much so that things were so bad that people were trying in vain to escape from New York. Now, the virus seemed to be really affecting the metropolitan area since there's more people there. It's much more congested. When I'm holed out here in Burbank, here in Burbank things got really really bad, and my folks live 45 minutes outside of the city, so they live 40 to 45 minutes in the greater Los Angeles area. So I felt I'm gonna stay with them for a while and check to see how they're doing, keep an eye on their health, and did everything I could in an effort to escape from LA. Now, during the lockdown, there were still some protests going on of things that didn't necessarily have anything to do with COVID 19. They were more of social issues regarding police brutality. Lots of protests regarding Black Lives Matter. Even in my hometown, there were a lot of peaceful protests outside of City Hall. I got to witness a peaceful protest outside of the Chino Police Department. And so I think the next film would appropriately be Assault on Precinct 13. Now, as the months went on, things were getting a little more serious with the virus. And so we were listening to any broadcast that we could that was instructing us to, stay indoors. Some people were still going to church. So I think next on the list would be The Fog. Now, this is a part of the list that I'm going to dive a little bit more deeper into as far as the themes go. The next film on the list would be John Carpenter's 1982 remake of The Thing. Now, a little bit of background on this film. Growing up, John Carpenter was a huge fan of Howard Hawks. That was one of his favorite film directors. And you could kind of see the influence in some of John Carpenter's work. Some of John Carpenter's films usually utilize an ensemble cast, and Howard Hawks was one of those film directors that liked using an ensemble cast to, to tell his story. Now, Howard Hawks had directed the original 1952 version of The Thing, which was called The Thing from Another World. Being that that film was set in the 50s, they didn't really have the technology to present a life form that would imitate other beings. So they had to personify it. And so in the original version of The Thing, the life form was personified by an actor named James Arness, who went on to play the character of Matt Dillon in TV's Gunsmoke. And it's funny because when you watch the original version of The Thing, James Arness as the alien kind of has a little bit of that Michael Myers vibe to him. Like he's wearing like the boiler suit and, kind of walks like him a little bit. And if you watch the original 1978 Halloween, the kids that Jamie Lee Curtis is babysitting in that film are watching the original version of The Thing on TV. And a few years later, it would just be a matter of years before John Carpenter would eventually remake that film. It was a neat little tie-in. Now, in the remake of The Thing, John Carpenter chose to stick closer to the original story that it was inspired by. It was a short story called Who Goes There? I think by, the last name is Campbell. I think it was like Scott Campbell or John Campbell. I'm butchering the author's name, and I'm sure I'm going to get wrapped in the mouth for that. But in the short story, the life form was, the alien was a life form that would imitate whatever other life form it came in contact with. So if it came in contact with a dog, it would imitate a dog. If it came in contact with a human being, it would imitate another human being. And what John Carpenter's remake does brilliantly is that it really dives into the human condition of paranoia and not being able to trust the people that you're holed up with. Now, a little bit about the plot of The Thing. The Thing deals with a group of scientists that are holed up in a small military scientific outpost in Antarctica, and they have to brace the elements. They're in isolation from the rest of the world. They're in freaking Antarctica. They're completely closed off from the rest of the world. And they come across this, without spoiling anything, they come across this life form that is able to imitate dogs and humans. And so, there's a lot of that paranoia going on. Nobody's able to trust anybody because the Thing is able to imitate other people. And at one point, the characters do a blood test on each other to see who has been infected by the Thing. So, with the themes of isolation, lockdown, and blood tests, and not being able to trust anybody, it kind of fits in with the theme of what's going on. It's a very well-crafted movie. All of the effects are done by a young Rob Bottin, who, the effects are all practical effects, and for 1982, the effects still hold up remarkably well. Check it out because it's phenomenal. And one of the reasons why those effects shots look so well is because of the way how they were photographed. Moving on, the next film is probably the film that I recommend the most, and the one that I'm probably going to be talking about the most, because it was so relevant to the time when it was made, and sadly it's even more relevant now than it was back then. And that is John Carpenter's The Thing. They Live. John Carpenter's They Live stars Rowdy Roddy Piper of, you know, WWF, and Keith David, who also appeared in John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, They Live tells the story of a drifter who's kind of down on his luck. He's looking for work, you know, he's homeless, and he comes across a pair of sunglasses that, when he puts them on, it reveals all of these subliminal messages that people don't notice. And for example, he puts on the glasses, and what you would think would be a billboard advertising something would say the words obey or consume or marry and reproduce, and there's all these like weird subliminal messages. And the other horrifying element is that when he puts on the glasses, certain people do not look like human beings. When he puts on the glasses, certain people are revealed to be these ghoulish looking skeletal alien beings. And what this movie does remarkably well is that I could go on for minutes, maybe hours, about the social themes of this movie. And what this movie does brilliantly well is that it uses those social themes. Those social themes are pretty on the nose in this movie, but they're able to craft it in a way where it's not too preachy, and it doesn't. It's still done in an entertaining way. Rowdy Roddy Piper's character tries to, you know, persuade other people to wear the glasses to show them what he sees. And the themes of this movie deals with how those that are in power, that have authority over us, whether it be law enforcement or politicians or the rich and the elite, have so much control over the working class to the point where they're kind of grooming us to be slaves to them. And it's a very exaggerated way of saying what's going on now. Now, if you do come across this film, I highly recommend getting the latest special edition by Shout Factory, because they have a really cool interview with John Carpenter, with him going in depth about the themes of this movie. And you know, I highly recommend getting that edition of the movie, because he goes into so many things that I want to be able to talk about, but I'm not going to have the time to talk about. But yeah, it's one thing that struck me about the interview was that he feels like the 1980s has never really left us, because when this movie was made, it was made at the height of Reaganomics, and John Carpenter felt that even to this day, there's still some of that going on, where, you know, the elite, the people that are in power and authority, they tell us, we're rich, we have the money and the power that we need, and we'll eventually get to you. We'll do that like trickle down economics that doesn't really work. And there's also some other cool interviews with other people that did the movie, that they talk about they also go into in depth about the themes of this film. But yeah, of all the films that are on this list, this is probably required viewing. This is probably the one that's most relevant to what's going on today. And yeah, definitely check it out. The last movie... Wait, I'm going to add one more movie before I get to the last film. Now, the next film I don't actually have a physical copy of, but I've seen it many times. And that is John Carpenter's remake of Village of the Damned, starring Christopher Reeve and Mark Hamill. And like The Thing, it's a remake of another classic 50s B movie, actually 60s, but the only reason that I would put it on the list is because the first part of the movie does deal with a small town that's being quarantined by the military uh, to investigate what's going on. So you do have the themes of a small town in isolation and being very highly regulated by military presence. So that's another one that I would add on to the list. Now, the final film that I'm going to discuss was not necessarily directed by John Carpenter, but he was very heavily involved in it, and it still permeates with that John Carpenter feel, and that is the movie that you see up on screen, Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. Now, do not let the title fool you. This movie has nothing to do with any of the other films in the Halloween series. The intent behind this movie was that John Carpenter and his buddies, they wanted to make an anthology set of films where each year they would tell a different story, but it would either be set on Halloween or have something to do with the holiday of Halloween. And, on paper, it's a great idea. And unfortunately, so they tried it with this, they experimented with this film. And unfortunately, it bombed at the box office when it was first released. Over the years, it's garnered a cult following, it has a new legion of fans, it's been rediscovered and reevaluated. And so, so now it's, people are starting to take a look at it and they're thinking, wait, it's really not that bad. And, so the thing about this film, one of the reasons that it didn't do too well was because, in the title it says Halloween 3, and it has the number 3 in it. And when you already have two films preceding it where you have recurring characters, the audience expectation is that they're going to see those characters again. And the film was not really advertised that well to emphasize that this was a different story altogether. So with that in mind, it didn't do so well, and so the whole anthology idea was nixed, and the filmmakers just went back to having more movies with Michael Myers killing people, for better or worse. I still enjoy those films. But the plot of this film regards a Irish entrepreneur who's kind of like this evil Willy Wonka. That's kind of an oxymoron, because Willy Wonka was also kind of sinister to an extent. But that's not the point. The point is that this Irish entrepreneur has a line of Halloween masks that are a really hot item this year. And so much so that, the people that buy them are glued to their TV sets with these commercials telling people to wear your masks on Halloween and watch this commercial at 9 for a big giveaway. And some of the main characters in this movie stumble upon a plot where this entrepreneur, his plan is to actually murder millions of children with Halloween masks all across the country. And as the director had stated, this film is pretty much, it's witchcraft meets the computer age. That's what's going on. And ironically, unlike all the other movies in this series, this movie actually is about the holiday Halloween and the origins of Halloween. But going into why I would add this movie to the list of COVID themed is because, just like the last two films that I mentioned, there's some elements in this film that are kind of prophetic. There's even a character that jokes around saying, oh, maybe they're not going to have Halloween this year. The idea that people are glued to their TV sets controlled by, a corporation that's telling people across the country to wear their masks. It's strangely prophetic in a way. And I was discussing with some friends that if this movie were remade today, or if there was a sequel to this particular movie, I'm sure that instead of the TV commercial that plays in this film, that it would be replaced with people glued to their cell phones, and instead of the commercial, it would be like a cell phone app telling people to put on to wear their masks, in public, and that stuff happens. Um, yeah, and it's like there's that undercurrent of a corporation that seems wholesome and jolly on the outside, but has that like sinister uh, undertone behind the veil of being this jolly, fun-filled corporation, and the idea that a corporation would be telling people to wear masks, and it's an event that's going all across the all across the nation. It kind of fit in with the rest of the movies going on. Um, Moving on, a little bit of background onto that film. Like I said, it wasn't directed by John Carpenter, but he did the score for the film, and John Carpenter is known for doing the scores for all of his movies. So all of the movies that I've talked about, the music is done by him, which is really cool. And this one in particular has a really badass score to it. They Live has a badass score. In regards to Halloween 3, not only did he do the score, but he also produced it and wrote a big chunk of the script. There were 3 other writers, but he also had a say in it as well. And the director of Halloween 3 actually did work on the original Halloween. He played the Shape in some of the scenes and was the one that came up with the idea to use a William Shatner mask in the original Halloween. And speaking of, the characters in this film are watching the original Halloween on TV, so things get kind of meta. And there's an actress from the original Halloween that plays a different character, and also you hear Jamie Lee Curtis's voice has a cameo as the person that's giving the curfew to the small town with cameras. So you hear Jamie Lee Curtis's voice in the movie, and as well as at the beginning of Escape from New York. But yeah, check those movies out. In the description below, eventually I will do a recap of all the movies that I discussed for this season to check out. And let's see. Yes. Now it's time for the big giveaway of who will be my co-host to be holed up with me in a bunker for season 3. Let's see who the lucky winner is. Draw my names here. Put a little bit more effort into it. Let's see who we have. See. Aha. Lindsay Seal. Lily Seal. Congratulations, you will now be my co-host for season 3, which will be titled The Year the Earth Stood Still, where we will be going over films with a pandemic theme, broadcasting from inside a bunker during the 3rd quarantine. Now, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to season 3, and yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, don't forget to wear your masks, and happy Halloween.